In this session, we are going to talk about the issue of cabin waste. And we're going to break this down into a few different parts. I'm going to introduce the panel. I've got an excellent panel here, highly qualified individuals to help us discuss this topic. I will introduce them, and then I'm going to spend about 30 to 40 minutes running through the results of the Aviation Sustainability Forum's audit program, which was completed across November of last year and March of this year, and was supported by IATA and many leading airlines and SATS Catering in terms of the facilities that were made available to us to conduct the audits in Singapore. What I'll then do is allow the panel to invite them back and allow them to introduce themselves and talk about how this issue is affecting them, and they'll talk for about 5 minutes and summarize with what they see as the three key challenges for their particular area, whether that be regulation, catering, airlines, and aircraft manufacture. Because it is these groups within our industry that are the ones which will be working out how to solve the problem that we face, and it is quite a big problem. What I'll then do is turn over to some questions to the panel, and we'll start looking at and talking about the barriers that we're facing and the potential solutions that we could put in place. As a sector, we're trying to move towards net zero at 2050. This is one of the areas that we can control. It is one of the areas that we can solve. SAF and many others are on the way, but there are big issues around that. This is within our control. So let me just first of all just introduce your panel. Daniela. Daniela is a sustainability manager at IATA and has been pivotal in helping us with this program. Celine. Celine is head of sustainability for SATS, recently joined, in the hot seat, but I'm pretty sure she's going to do okay. Claire, KLM, sustainability, and also has spent her time as an engineer and cabin crew, so is eminently qualified to talk about this issue. And Michael, who is an ambassador. His job is to design the cabins that the crew work with. So you can see how these guys come together to actually create the experience for the passenger and are also able to help us understand the issue that we face. So I'm going to let you guys sit down for about 20 minutes, and I'm going to bring you back once I've run through the audit and the results. Firstly, I would like to just tell you a bit about the Aviation Sustainability Forum and who we are. We basically were founded just around COVID, and it came together as a group of Monty's Bakehouse, which was my prior business, our customers, came together and we sat in an innovation center and we talked about the issue of waste and the fact that we might be loading on as much we can do around sustainable products, but much of it was being wasted or going to landfill and incineration at the end. And we spend a lot of time talking to sectors outside of aviation, universities, people who had spent their life in sustainability, Grantham Institute of Climate Change and others. And I would say that was an educative process that we went through to try and just understand how we fit as aviation within the issue of the waste that we generate. And many of you might be familiar with the stat that's there at the moment. We are around 2 to 3% of global emissions is down to aviation. But unless we move forward by 2050, we could be up in the 20%. And I go back to the point, this sector this bit that you'll see today is one area where we have a chance to improve. What we then did was try to raise awareness of what we were doing within the sector as we started to come out of COVID. And we ran a campaign called Unwaste, and this was to try and engage governing bodies such as IATA and airlines and caterers to try and understand what we were doing and how could we help. We were still thinking about collaborative discussion at that point to try and arrive at solutions. But in 2022, back end of and into 23, discussions with IATA, we realized that the last time that any meaningful audits were done of cabin waste within the sector were back in 2014. And you'll see some of the highlights of those results in a moment. And actually, so much has happened over the last 10 years, not just in terms of our growth, but also the types of materials that we're placing on board. All the work that we've been doing to lightweight what we're putting on board has meant that we've been through significant change. There is now more difference in materials on board aircraft than there was 10 years ago in terms of types. That makes it more complicated. Makes it better in some ways, but more complicated. And what we agreed with the right approach was that what the industry didn't have was reliable data. Data on which we could really understand, not just by category of waste, but the type of waste within that category. Category might be plastics or aluminium, but what is in there in that aluminium? Where is it on the aircraft? How much of it is there? So that we could try and actually arrive at a statistical conclusion as to how much waste we were generating as a sector, down to the type of waste and where it's found on board the aircraft. And that's the audits that we did. I should add that the ASF is a completely voluntary organisation. All of this work has been done by people putting their time in at no cost whatsoever. Hours and hours of auditing aircraft, day and night, right through the night. Alison will bear witness. And it's a tough job, but it is well worth doing to try and understand the scope of the problem, and commercially, and this is the key point, how much money we're wasting. And it is billions of dollars that you will see in a moment that we are wasting. We all generate waste in everything that we do as we go about our daily lives, whether we go to the gym, whether we order our Amazon, whether we take takeaway meals. Everything we do generates waste, and billions of tons of it is generated every year. We all know that, and transport is a significant part of what we do, the way we travel. And aviation is now the fastest growing sector within travel. With IATA predicting that over the next 25 years to 2050, we could double in size. And you'll see the implications of that in a moment. But I just want to set the scene here, because this sector is quite remarkable. The things that we have done, the challenges that we have faced over the development of aviation are incredible. We can solve massive, complicated problems. We can design like better than any other. Some of the materials that are in the world come from this sector. We're not short on talent. And that's something I just want to just reference now.
Aviation. It's one of man's greatest achievements. From the first commercial flight in 1914 to an average of 115,000 daily commercial flights today, our industry brings the world together, reuniting families, building relationships, offering new experiences, and making memories. Bringing the privileges of the wealthy to everyone. Some of the world's best engineers, scientists, and visionaries have helped create an innovative, forward-looking industry, which is constantly evolving and developing. We are at the forefront of technology and moving quickly towards more sustainable fuel solutions. But, as with any industry growing so fast and going so far, the challenges keep arising. To deliver what passengers want, behind the scenes is a highly complex, vast supply chain. Sourcing, producing, delivering, serving, collecting, removing, and disposing of the waste, ready for the next flight 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. While the number of flights grows, so does the size and scale of the cabin waste. The time has come for us to deal with our waste as professionally and as efficiently as all other aspects of our industry. The aviation industry has grown from one plane in 1903 to 26,000 commercial aircraft in 2019, and this is expected to double by 2050. And from 4 billion passengers in that same year, 2019, to 10 billion in 2050, more than the current population of the world. We create over 3.5 million tons of waste per year today, and it's growing. And as that waste grows, the financial and environmental consequences are clear. Together, we have to take action now. As a sector, we need to come together to solve the problem of cabin waste. Despite the challenge of international regulation, we must jointly find a way forward. We are responsible. We should lead the change. Understanding the scale and composition of cabin waste is the first step. Solutions come from data, And audits of cabin waste are starting to give us new factual data. The ASF audited program, supported by IATA and leading airlines, hosted by SATS Catering, has helped provide our sector with a better understanding of what we're throwing away. Data we can use to reduce waste levels, redesign supply chains, increase recycling, improve circularity, and minimize disposal. Data that will be the start of a coherent and effective waste management strategy, a strategy for individual airlines, for caterers, and the sector as a whole, a starting point we can all unite around and work together. We can take this problem on. We will improve our industry in this as we have done in so many other areas. We will work together for the common good of the industry, for passengers, and for our world. Thank you.
The only message I wanted to really get across with that is we know how to solve problems, and we should be optimistic. Whilst what you're going to see now in terms of the stats is compelling, we should be optimistic that we can solve the problem. And we're also very, very, very gifted as a sector, extremely gifted unlike other sectors, because we know every single item that is loaded on every commercial aircraft that takes into the skies. We know it. We complete a cabin manifest, galley loading plans. We have all of that data at the touch of our fingertips. Might be difficult, might be in many different formats. Spoke to one airline today who was saying some of it's still handwritten. But it's there. We have that information. If we were a restaurant or a household, we wouldn't have that information. We wouldn't know that. The only thing we don't know is what the passenger has bought on board themselves. And that is an issue around the regulation, because there's a fear factor there of bringing animal products on board which have come from one country and then go to another, and the transfer of animal disease. And that's part of the risk that we have around the regulation, which we will no doubt touch on when we get to the questions and the panel. But we're also gifted on the other side as well. Although that aircraft may have flown halfway around the world and it may land at a different caterer, we do know what comes off it, and we do know where it goes. One of two places. It's either going to a cabin cleaning company or it's going back to a catering company, where everything that's rotable is moved around and flown back the other way. So we have some benefits here as a sector. We're closed if we want to be. If we want to work out how we share that data in that way, we could. And it is data that the airlines desperately need to be able to make the changes that they would want to. But it is a difficult problem. And with any complex problem, because we're a network around the world, you need to understand it, you need to be able to break it down, and you need the data to be able to baseline it. And that's the whole premise of the ASF audit program. And when we've presented the data back to airlines, quite often, sometimes for the first time, we might be giving granularity that's not been seen before, perhaps. But we're certainly giving them information that allows them to baseline where they are right now and where they potentially could be, if we could just track it in that way. And that's the way that we've tried to approach this in terms of the development of the audit program we've got. And there's some very important points here. At the bottom, each airline that is audited or caterer that is working with us, that information is theirs. That thick red line is a firewall. Nobody will see that information or that data beyond the airline themselves. But what we do is we classify those flights into whether they're a low cost, a short, a medium, or a long. And at that point, the data is aggregated and becomes anonymous. So what we start to do is build a pattern of the waste generated by flight length and flight type. That's very, very important, because those flights are different in the way that they are configured, the type of aircraft, the type of passengers, the type of service that's offered on board. It's a crude division, but it's a decent division. What we're then able to do is aggregate that up into a total for the sector and track that over time. And that is extremely valuable information for the governing bodies or the trade bodies within our sector to be able to see how our sector is moving over time to a better place. And regulators are asking for this information from us. How are you improving? If you're improving, they might be, perhaps, in a better place to then give us concessions around what we're doing. So it's very important that we support our trade bodies through this audit program. And the method by which we're anonymizing and aggregating the information allows that to happen, whilst allowing the airlines underneath to be able to put in place their own strategies to be able to manage their problem or their opportunity to save money through the waste generated. And we do this through the use of those static files that are shown there. That's the cabin manifest, the loads, which are ingested pre-audit into an app that we're now developing. And that then allows the data at the audit to be captured, matched, and that then goes back into an Azure-placed Microsoft platform based on Databricks, and the data moves along and is profiled, cleaned, transformed, and presented into the files that are needed to be able to be interrogated to give the analysis that's needed, and out into Power BI. And then there is the unique portal logins there for the airlines and for IATA, who will only see the applicable information to them. This is in its infancy. There is such a long way to go in getting the program that is going to be able to be rolled out quickly and efficiently. But the first step of this model is will be available from September, October of this year. The program that we conducted across November of last year and March of this year, and I'm going to start getting into some of the numbers now. So this is where your questions should come, and there will be a Q&A at the end of this, and I'm sure there's going to be people in the audience who will want to look at some of these numbers and have us talk further about them and the way that we've arrived at them. But essentially, SATs who are a member of the ASF, by allowing us access to their facilities at Changi, and with those airlines that were participating in the audit program, we went through around 6 tons of waste by hand at this point, across about a month and a half, with one audit in the morning, one audit at night. There's a lot of work and a lot of waste, and there's some of the airlines came in for this, and they watched us go through it. It was a big job. And what we were able to do is not just look at that waste in total, but in the category, plastics, paper, organic waste, food, but where was it on the plane? Was it in the galley bags? Was it on the floor of the plane? Was it in the carts? Which carts, economy or business? So premium, up the front end or the back end? Was it in the compactor boxes? Was it in the bonded carts, the snack carts? We were able to try and track all the waste down and apply it into those categories, and then break that category down, plastics by type, and that's just an example that I'm showing there. And then photographs were taken to peg that back, because what airlines want to be able to see is a picture of that waste so they can identify which meal it was. And we also itemized each of those down at that level as well. So that's how it works. Now, I referenced that the last audits that were done by IATA and Closed Loop were back 10 years ago in 2014. And for those of you that are familiar with the IATA Cabin Waste Handbook, you'll know in there's a statistic that of around 1.4 kg of waste per passenger is the average. Now, those audits were primarily long haul, and I just want you to just hang on to long haul and that number as we go through the next few slides. But the ASF audit program was more balanced. We looked at short, medium and long, and we're continuing to place flights into each of those categories now as they're audited. And what you'll see there is that on short haul, for those flights that were audited, there's only 5 so far on this data, 762 grams is the weight per passenger that was on those flights. Slightly less on medium haul for whatever reason, 746. And on long haul, by comparison to that 1.4 kg, we were at 1.2. So there's a delta of 222 grams between the 2010 study on long haul and the 2024 study that we've got to on long haul. And I'll come to that delta in a moment. When you average that out across the audits and that 5.9 tons of waste that was sifted through in the way that we've described, you arrive on that basis for the audits for the 25 at 940 grams of waste on those audits. So the winners and the losers, and this is a really, really important slide when you look at the 2014 work compared to 2024 is that food waste looks like it's increased. And we don't know why that necessarily is at the moment. Were we actually getting to a higher level of capture through the work that was done by the ASF? We don't know. But it looks like there's an increase in food and beverage waste. And that is no packaging involved in there. That is liquid and organic waste. But what's good to see on there is the amount of recyclable material has increased. And we'd expect that with the lightweighting that's been done and with the change in materials that have gone on board. So that is a positive from that point of view. And just going back to that 940 and the delta, which is the second bar from the top, of 222 grams as compared to the 1.4 kg on long haul and the 1.178 that we saw in the audit program, we went into that in a little bit more detail, and we think it's the lightweighting of materials that's causing that, but also that we don't load newspapers and magazines anymore on flights. We were 10 years ago. And we think that is somewhere in around 100 grams a passenger by average in terms of what's brought on board. And we just don't see that loaded anymore onto flights. But we need to take this a little bit further. Our data in terms of that weight per passenger on flight type is important. And what we know from studies in 2021 by ResearchGate around what percentage of flights passengers are traveling short, medium or long, you can see those statistics there of 86% is short haul, 4% is long. So when you take those passenger numbers of 4.7 million and split those down in those percentages, which is the first column in that table, and then multiply that back out by the grams per passenger across the different types, that's how we've arrived at around 3.6 million tons of waste that we're generating per year as a sector, set to double as we go to 2050. And that actually drives out a lower number, as you expect, at around 776 grams a passenger. But when you look at this, and you look at whether it's partially eaten food, partially drunk beverage, untouched food, untouched beverage, that actually accounts for nearly 65% of the waste. Is catering waste, is our business's waste, this conference's waste, our sector's waste. We are all contributing to those numbers, whether we like it or not. And you can see the food waste and the beverage waste figures at the top there. But that's not just the story. We're flying that round the world. And we're burning fuel while we fly it. And when you look at the cost of fuel and you try and proportion that back down to the waste, we are burning around 1.9 million tons of fuel on that 3.6 million tons. And that's costing us, or emitting 6 million tons of CO2e. And then through regulation largely, we have to dispose of that waste at the other end, whether that's incineration, landfill, and that is emitting another 2.5 million tons of CO2. So this is incredibly wasteful around that food and beverage waste. But I want to get down to the commercial cost, and I want to just look at one area only, and that is untouched food. It doesn't even get presented. It gets made, not presented to a passenger, taken off the flight at the other end, thrown away, disposed of. So if you look at the percentages that were on one of the slides before, we calculate that 18% of the waste by weight is untouched food. And that is around 659,000 tons of food. And if you take the math on that, and you think about the average weight of a meal for an American citizen or a British citizen is 500 grams. 1.32 billion meals. We're feeding America at a population of 340 million 4 times a year. Every year and a half, we're giving every person in India a meal. That's the scale of the waste that we have on our hands at the moment. And we believe those numbers are right. And even if they're out by 15-20%, they're still big. But it's the cost. Very rarely does sustainability come with a benefit. If we could capture that 2.6 billion at the bottom of food cost, that is a great saving that we can go at as a sector that could be reinvested in the passenger experience and improve passenger experience. But when you add beverage to that and you add the fuel burn of it, you actually get to a sum of around 3.8 billion is the prize for reducing food and beverage waste. And we'll never get it to zero. But could we get a third out? Could we get half out? That's the question. I think we have. So by closing, I want to now bring a panel back in a moment. We are making great progress on sustainable materials. We are making great progress on lightweighting. We are making great progress on crew segregation. You're going to hear a lot about that in a moment. And we are seeing the introduction of disposal methods at caterers that are compliant with regulation are starting to come through. But we get to a point where our sector needs to come together, and aircraft manufacturers with airlines and with caterers need to work together to try and influence the regulatory framework that we're in to allow us to break down the barriers of what we face in terms of the waste that we manage. And that's the challenge that we have now, in the challenge that we have to take forward to 2050 on what I think is one of the problems that we in this room can solve. With that, I will like to bring the panel back and we'll start the discussion. So in turn, the panel will take you through 5 minutes of their world and cabin waste as it relates to the businesses that they're in, and summarize at the end with 3 challenges that they see their area of the business faces, the sector faces. And then we'll get into a discussion around some of the solutioning which we've been talking about. So Daniela, please.
Thanks, Matt. Okay. There we go. So, well, hi everyone. My name is Daniela Stange. I am Corporate Sustainability Manager for IATA. IATA is the International Air Transport Association, and we are the trade association that represents some 320 airlines around the globe. And I'm going to talk to you today about international catering waste in aviation and the challenges and opportunities that this brings. So before actually going to the what we can do and we cannot do, we need to understand the why. So this is how the global landscape of international catering waste looks like right now. All the countries that you see in red, and perhaps even some more, because this is a live scenario, have regulations today that preclude reuse and recycling due to strict regulations that standardize and propose treatment methods that require either incineration, sterilization, and deep land burial. How do these regulations compare, and also what makes them a little bit different? Because all of these touch on different means of transport, right? They are not taking into consideration the profile risks of the meals that we're serving. So basically what we're saying is the preparation of meal is not taking into consideration here, and we have also seen that there are no quantitative risk assessments that prove that this is actually the case when coming up with the regulations. In terms of differences, we see that the United States, for example, do not only consider meat products, but they also include fruits and vegetables. But they do allow exemptions. They do allow exemptions in order to reuse certain foodstuff and to recycle different items only if they have been segregated on board. And the case of Canada, considering that all of these regulations are more than 15 years old, they are preparing a public consultation in order to review this and allowing for new treatment methods. So this is actually checking if these regulations are actually fit for purpose. How this actually precludes the ability of airlines to reduce and recycle, it's best exemplified in a video that KLM did as part of our advocacy campaign in order to draw the attention of the European Commission onto these topics.
Dutch airline KLM burns 13 to 14 tons of catering waste every day in order to comply with EU legislation. If the EU is serious about circularity, this needs to change. Meals, drinks and snacks are part of any flight experience. At KLM, they pride themselves on the food and beverages they serve, but also on the way they minimise catering waste. After a flight, waste is separated into 14 different streams, and any unconsumed food is loaded onto a next flight within strict quality limits. Furthermore, data models are used to predict how much catering should be loaded onto any flight. This prevents food from being wasted. KLM shares this mission with dozens of other airlines. There is a problem, however, because EU legislation classifies catering waste from outside the EU as a risk to animal health, as diseases could potentially spread. This forces airlines to destroy this waste. However, there is no scientific evidence confirming this risk, and because the legislation is too broad, similar waste must be processed in different ways. One example is coffee grounds. Identical coffee in pads or tins is loaded onto a European and intercontinental KLM flight at Schiphol Airport, the Netherlands. On-board processing is similar until it comes to disposal. On returning to Schiphol, coffee grounds from the European flight are turned into compost and biogas, whereas those from the intercontinental flight are burnt with other waste. European airlines fully support animal health, of course, but this example shows how restrictive this legislation is. Consequently, any airline flying into the EU is obliged to burn catering waste on arrival, regardless of the origin. This means industry waste has increased substantially to 430,000 tonnes per year, which is equal to the amount of waste that 810,000 EU citizens produce in a year. This puts European airlines in a difficult position. We want to be more sustainable, in line with EU's own ambitions, striving for a circular economy, but EU legislation is also restricting us from recycling and reusing more. If it's safe to do so, the industry wants to recycle and reuse as much as possible. Our customers want this too. We call on EU policymakers to address this problem. Let's work together to reduce waste.
So with that, we go back to the challenges, and later on I will touch in the opportunities as well. The first thing is we need to move from the perceived risks that airline catering waste produces to the actual risk, which, as Matt already mentioned, is the items that are being smuggled by passengers. We also need to address the lack of guidance. Some of these regulations are open to interpretation, and even though there are some exemptions in terms of reuse and recycle, we need to understand how this complies with on-site audits. Different treatments alternatives. As I said before, we're under this scheme of cook, burn, and bury. We need to start introducing new models. There is a lack of space in the cabin, especially if airlines are obliged to do segregation on board, and we deal with very short turnaround times in some cases in order to have this done. The costs. As Matt mentioned as well, right? There are hidden costs of waste management. These are either in airport charges or in the contracts that airlines have with caterers, but we need to understand this better if we want to manage our waste. And this builds into the next one, which is contract conditions. Who owns this? Who has the direct control of what we can do with the waste in those jurisdictions that this topic is not legislated? But there are things that we can do, and we have been doing some of those as well. We need to advocate for smarter regulations, engaging with the regulators in order to continue supporting animal health. This is an animal health issue, it's not a human health one. We need to understand our customers. Customers today want to see recycling, they want to see less single-use plastics in the plane, and why do I mention this? Because when airlines are making the efforts in order to replace certain products, for international flights, those products still need to be burned. We need to improve onboard material recovery. We need to know and own our waste numbers, and this is the fact, and this is the part where the audits that are being conducted are crucial, and we need to know how much this is going to cost us as well. We need to invest those waste reductions into new technology and into making sure that the aircrafts that we operate are fit for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela.
Fascinating presentation. My name is Céline Ourcade. I'm the new VP of Sustainability and ESG for SATS Group. Really new, so I just joined this month. My background is on sustainability in aviation, but with IATA, so a former colleague of Daniela. And I had my own consulting company also before. Very passionate about sustainability in general, and especially in the aviation sector. Food is quite new to me, but I'm very lucky, gifted, as Matt would say, because my team is extremely competent on the topic. So what SATS do? Well, the group is like very large, it's global. We are number one in air cargo handling, but in terms of food, we have a large and the largest Asian food catering business. We are based in Singapore, and we have various food solution facilities where we do produce meals, frozen or fresh. In the UK with Monty's Bakehouse, in China with 2 factories, 4 actually, I think, 4.
Yep.
India, Thailand, and Singapore. In terms of our environmental targets, so I'm in charge of sustainability as a whole, but I'm going to only talk about environment right now. We have a carbon emission reduction target, so on the reduction of our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 50% by 2030, but also the net zero ambition by 2050. The food waste, we have as a target to reduce food waste intensity by 50% by 2030. Forgot to put the date here. And in terms of sustainable packaging, we want to ensure that 100% of our SAF packaging are either reusable or recyclable ready, because we can't really dictate that this is recycled, both for the food and gateway businesses by 2030 as well. So those are our really broad targets, and we have other commitments to really look beyond that on cabin waste, on the single-use plastic, circular economy, sustainable sourcing, alternative proteins. I mean, the list is quite long in terms of sustainability related to catering business. So what we feel that the challenges that caterers are facing. First, we need to consider the local waste regulation. So we are based in Singapore, and we have to comply with Singapore-based regulations, and it can differ, and it does differ, from one country to another and from one region to another. What Daniela just mentioned for Europe doesn't apply to Singapore equally. And I guess on your regulatory agenda, this is also the harmonization of regulations, not only the more guidance, but also the harmonization part. In terms of national directives in Singapore, by 2030, the Singapore government said that Singapore needs to divert waste away from landfill by 30% by 2030, and we need to increase the recycling also and reach 70% by the same date. We have to consider the local capabilities that exist, so the solution providers that exist, the recycling facilities, etc. And also the cultural aspect. Not every country and every culture has the same focus on the issue and the same way to look at it. So it has also some importance. And when we talk about harmonizing the regulations and the best practices, it has also to be considered. And very, very, very important, this is a multiple stakeholder challenge. So it can't be done by IATA, it can't be solved by the airline, it can't be solved by the caterer, it can't be solved by the regulator, it can't be solved by the aircraft manufacturers. It has to be a collaborative effort. The new way of collaboration, so the win-win-win-win-win collaboration. So what we learned, so Matt said that SATS facilitated that large audit with ASF and IATA in Singapore. What we have learned from that audit is that cabin waste includes different waste elements from food, non-food, but also e-waste, very different type of treatment. That data is required to know where we are, to understand the situation, to really understand the case for change. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. It can't be a unique solution. You just mentioned that there are differences also between long, medium, and short-haul flights. So in any case, to understand and to put that in context and to really have impact, we need to collaborate. So what I'm seeing here is the opportunity to not only reduce the waste, but also reduce the carbon emissions associated to excess food, and also to improve the passenger experience overall and reduce costs.
Right. Not bad for a beginner, huh?
Thank you, Celine.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Claire Luiten, working at KLM Royal Dutch Airline as a sustainability engineer, and I'm responsible for making the onboard catering product more efficient. I'm working at the department Cabin Products and Service Engineering, where we are managing the whole onboard catering product as well as the working methods for our crew. And actually this is key when we are talking about pre-segregation or talking about recycling. We need our crew to take this first step, and therefore half of our department is working on board as well, part-time, being a cabin attendant as myself here on the picture. We want to close the bridge between the office where we are designing the product serving for our customers to our crew who is serving this product. And at KLM, we actually look at sustainability same as at safety. We want to cooperate on it together with other airlines. We want to share best practices. We do not want to compete on it. And an example is maybe the flight challenge, which is organized by SkyTeam. Over 20 airlines are joining each year, trying to make a flight as efficient as possible and share all the ideas afterwards. And one of the key challenges, I'm gonna speak about 3 of them, is already named and also shown in the video. It's on international catering waste. Currently, it hampers us and lots of airlines, caterers do more recycling. So this is really a hard part. However, we are able to take steps already at this moment. So in my function, I'm currently focusing on 5 different pillars. And the first one is weight reduction. Today we're talking about waste, a major challenge, but of course we might even have a bigger challenge, and that's our emissions in the airline industry. So reducing weight means less emissions. So always focusing on that. Smart packaging. What materials do we choose? Can we use less materials? Since a couple of years, we are using a life cycle assessment tool. And this tool helps us to assess the whole life cycle of a product and look into the environmental impacts, and is really supporting our decisions in which alternative materials to use. The third pillar is responsible ingredients. So we're also diving into the ingredients we are serving our passengers, because we want to reduce our scope 3 emissions. And the fourth is committed suppliers, because of course we cannot do it alone. We have to cooperate. We need our suppliers. Together we can innovate. And the last but not the least, waste management. Today we're talking about waste, and one of the challenges is data on the onboard consumption of our passengers. Currently, we're taking the first steps together with Airbus to see if we can get more data or create data on the consumption patterns in order to be able to exactly put on board what is consumed in order to reduce or prevent actually food waste. And our mission actually focuses on creating as less waste as possible, reduce waste, but also maximize value. So, for example, closed loop recycling. Food packaging should be recycled into food packagings again, and also minimize the impact. And this is actually the third challenge, because adding rotables instead of disposables will add up weight and also increase our emissions. At the other hand, we will have less waste. So always trying to find this balance. And this is a summary of the key 3 challenges we are facing. So first, the international catering waste, seek for possibilities. Second, can we create data on onboard consumption to prevent food waste? And third, are we able to create rotables, reusable items to have less waste without adding weight and adding emissions?
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Michael.
Michael, get us to 2:30 and we'll go for some questions.
Thanks, Claire. So last but not least, the view of an OEM on the topic. I'd like to start already with a kind of conclusion that we shared already. The topic, as we see it, is something we need to really take as a collaborative effort to take. Otherwise, there's nobody, as we believe, could solve the problem by their own. So we need that approach together to come to solving that issue. Secondly, and then we have Daniela on the stage, I think also standardization is key in some elements, even technical things. I will dive into it. Standards are important to roll it out for the whole world, that being applied easily in all the system, all the airlines, everything which is there. And last but not least, digitalization and data sharing, data continuity is something we truly believe is a key enabler to tackle that topic. So my name is Michael Bauer. I'm working in Airbus as a cabin and cargo architect and focusing on digitalization, product digitalization, IoT, capturing data on board and taking it for use for good. So let's start with we in Airbus, what we are doing here. So when we are talking about sustainability, we clearly understand that we are responsible for the entire life cycle of our parts of our aircraft. So that starts from design up to the very end of the recycling of the product. Here it's been focusing on the aircraft itself, but there are some elements which are also related to cabin. Let's have a look on number 1 has been design. One of the major impact of the cabin for the footprint is being laid down in design. So if you want to change something in the catering itself, from the galleys, from the catering equipment, that's been laid down already in the very beginning when we are designing aircraft cabins. So if you want to do something, that's the point to enact. And secondly, a big portion is the operation. As we just heard, in operation, that's something which is really a pain point. And also cabin waste is done during operations. There's something we need to do, and we see here also here in operation, that's one of the big levers we can link on. Then going a bit more in detail how we approach it, that's a study from our colleagues, and I have Axel Becker, one of my colleagues here in the audience, from our cabin market insights teams. They are looking to the market. It's been a study from 2021, looking what's been the trends, what are our customers are doing, what is really the pain point we're looking on. We are taking those numbers, we are looking into the segmentation of the areas and feeding that back to our customers and seeing if we are right with our assumption. We are revalidating it, but on the second step, also taking those kind of information, feeding that back to our R&D, to our development, to come up with some solution, with some services, whatever it takes to bring that to our customers and saying, does that help you solving your day-to-day problems? Now getting a bit more closer to catering, and that's just a view on the complex ecosystem. That's not exhaustive, and maybe the wordings we are using here as an OEM are not right, but it illustrates the complexity of the ecosystem, of the various players in between, and we truly believe that this complexity is something we need to solve. And I'm always inspired when I'm working in my office and on the Elbe, seeing those big container ships, and I'm always asking, how do those guys manage those kind of logistics? And that's also in complex ecosystem. It's been about data and sharing that together. On the other side, the airlines, as we've heard, they are distinguishing themselves by having the right food and beverage on board as their kind of passenger experience. So we need to fulfill that need as well. And lastly, today, as we have heard already, there are limited process data available. So there's no way really to interact with the system to change the process because there's missing data. So we believe really that data is a key enabler to improve the topic. Now dive into the cabin in itself. And the cabin in itself then, it is still a complex topic. The cabin crew have a lot of things to do during flight to serve all the stuff. You see all the manual things they have to do. But today, as we've heard, there's really difficulties to track what has been consumed during that service. There's today very limited ways on tracking the inventory, which has been still remaining on board, at least in flight. And lastly, that's also one of the enablers, preferences for the ordering for the passengers. There's no way to have it today. So we believe in having those elements fixed, we are able to provide some solutions on it. And lastly, my last slide has been and then two big challenges we see ahead. I think the process digitalization as such is a key enabler. And if I'm talking about the process, that also links to the question, is the industry willing to adapt the process? To stay with the process as today will not work. So we need to touch also the process in itself. Secondly, collaboration in the entire ecosystem. It's not just talking about it. I think we need to come to the point where we really make that kind of collaboration. Do it together, as already mentioned. And lastly, as mentioned before, the standardization. One of the examples I'm always seeing, and you guys called it the galley manifest or the loading plan. That's been different from airline to airline. The exchange between airline caterers are different. So if you want to put that as one of the foundation of doing something better, those kind of standards needs to be there to be able to share the data together and building on the same things. Lastly, what we are doing, just as an example, you see that picture, this is something we are doing as an OEM, trying to find some solutions on how to capture those data, thanks to technologies, thanks to AI, which is there. Concepts we are bringing to the market and trying to elaborate with the airlines if that are the right things to go. And that's what we are for as an OEM. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, it's okay, we can stop there. I wanted to just allow each of your panel to just give you an idea of their businesses and the challenges that they're facing themselves. But there's a couple of points that come out of there which are useful around the way that we're operating at the moment. It's largely individually. Claire was talking about the need to cross-pollinate the good news and what people are doing. And that collaboration theme keeps coming through. What I want to do is just place some microphones with you guys, and I'm going to take through the panel through the questions now around waste and how we can perhaps get to a better position on waste reduction and waste management. But I want to make this as interactive as possible, and as we go through, if there's questions that you would like to ask, please ask them. This is your chance to find out more around what is going on and what's taking place in the sector. But I want to just turn to Daniela, to you first, around regs. You explained very well around the regulations and how they apply, but could you just give us the differences between those countries that are within the regs in red and those like Singapore that are outside? What is the difference in the way that they can manage their waste?
Definitely. So for the countries in red, I mentioned it before, right, is this cook, burn, bury scheme. We cannot get out of that. For the countries that are in blue, some of them, so cabin waste is subject to national regulation anyway, and some of those will require some sort of method of treatment. So we can work within the regulations, particularly in those countries, and for those that are highly regulated, what we can do is work together with the regulators in order to make them understand the negligible risk that ICW from aviation poses.
Can you give us examples of where you've done that?
Yes, so we are working together in a project in the US with transatlantic trails from Europe, because the regulations are quite similar, working within the exemptions that they have in order to recycle. And then we would think, of course, they have regulations, recycling should already be happening. That is not necessarily the case, and this is part of where this need of guidance come, right? Because regulators need to understand the processes, and we need to work together with the caterers, so we are fully transparent, on board, on ground, on how the full stream of waste is produced. And in here, we're not even touching what happens at an airport level, right?
Yeah.
Because there is one stream of waste that goes through the caterer, there's another stream of waste that goes through the cleaner that, of course, cannot be reused or recycled, but can also have different methods of treatment.
And Claire, you know, KLM's in Europe, so you're within the jurisdiction big time. How is the regulation affecting your business? I mean, what are you doing to get around it, and what are you doing to comply with it?
Yes, so as shown in the movie, we are able to do lots of recycling on our European flights, over 14 streams at this moment. Do I have to? No, I think it's right. It's working right now.
Okay.
And we are aiming to do the same on, I will just look forward, to do the same on our intercontinental flights, and we're constantly having conversations with legislations, but also looking for exemptions. I think it's pretty comparable to the transatlantic trials, see which streams can we separate by crew, for example, aluminium, and recycle it instead of incineration or landfill.
And is there specifics around that? If that aluminium has come into contact with food, then is that out?
Not for beverages.
Sorry, I have to use a mic.
Yes, thanks.
Okay.
That's working. So for beverages, not. So cans at this moment we have an exemption for, and we are
Right.
able to do recycling. However, not on all aluminium at this moment.
Okay. And Daniela, I just want to go a bit. I do want to go a bit further into the regs as they apply and organic waste. Is there any solution that a caterer or an airline can put in place now for the disposal of organic waste in a regulated environment that's compliant, other than incineration?
Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, am I?
You take the mic.
Okay. Unfortunately, not at the moment. We have seen some trials in terms of biotreatment and composting, but not in a regulated environment right now.
Right. So I've heard people talk about anaerobic digestion as a way through,
Good, exactly.
but it's possible. So is that compliant or not?
No, it's not compliant.
It's not.
It's not compliant.
So there's nothing.
Yeah.
And that's a key message, isn't it? Because that then just leans straight into the question of what do we do to reduce the amount in the first place?
Exactly.
Okay, okay. Celine, you're in a non-regulated environment with SATs ourselves. And I think the Singapore government is placing SATs under pressure to reduce the amount of waste that goes to incineration. And everybody will know, Singapore, small country, it actually likes incineration because it generates light and heat, but we want to reduce it. And what's SATs doing about that in terms of trying to actually reduce the amount of inbound waste that goes into incineration?
So I think the first thing that the team is doing in Singapore is using those machines that are like compacting the waste. So that's removing all the liquids from the waste, which is quite substantial for food waste. And it does reduce like by at least 2, so by 50%, the weight of the waste, the inbound food waste to be incinerated. So that's one element, and it requires segregation at first on the type of waste, which is one big part also of the process and the regulation behind. Because there is this recycling also objective targets for the country, with 70% of waste to be recycled by 2030.
And how is that is that pushing not just SATs then, presumably the whole the airport?
The whole Singapore community, the airport, all the players, and that's the benefit of a small country. The collaboration is easier. It's true that in like locations or regions where you have multiple players, multiple countries, multiple regulators, this is more difficult. We are lucky enough in Singapore to have really a good ecosystem that is working towards the same goal, which gives us also the opportunity to test-bait solutions. So really try, see what can be done, etc., and then see eventually if we can export that to other places.
Okay, so operating in a non-regulated environment is allowing you to try things that others can't, but perhaps other regulators could look at and learn from.
Yeah, I'm a European myself. I'm not saying that regulations are not good. They are there for a purpose. But it's true that with operations like we have in Singapore, we can test things, and we can share the lessons. We can share some best practices, and it can help the other regulators overseas to see it differently and eventually to adapt.
Okay. So any other questions from the floor around regulation? Joe. Can we get a mic into the audience? Okay.
My name is Joe Savino from IATA Catering, and the panel mentioned before that organic waste.
Just go a bit closer, Joe.
Organic waste cannot be recycled by anaerobic digestion. There's two ways you could do it in the U.S. You could do anaerobic digestion. The USDA does recognize that, and also you could basically put a waste disposal system in, and you could flush it down the drain. Food waste. It's allowed by USDA. So I want to clarify that.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification. I was not
Okay.
And all food waste, when it comes any international flight that comes to the first port in the U.S., no matter if the food could be reused or not, must be disposed of. The USDA insists on that, and CBP will enforce that rule.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's thank you, Joe. We're learning. So what,
definitely.
for those that couldn't hear, Joe was actually saying there are compliant methods of organic food disposal within the US outside of incineration and landfill. And we have people on the panel who don't know that. So perhaps we're already learning that what we need to do is spend more time talking to each other and sharing the solutions that are out there. Michael, I want to bring you in. In the final slide we presented, I just showed the importance of collaboration with not just airlines and caterers, but aircraft manufacturers. And you referenced that in your slide as well. Why is Airbus interested in the amount of waste that we're generating? You know, what is your role in doing that? How successful have you been in that?
Well, I mean, even though repeating myself, as said, is it working? Yep.
I think we've got to try these, haven't we? It seems only mine's working.
Yeah. So even though repeating myself, as said, I mean, we are taking responsibility of the entire life cycle of the aircraft, and there are problems which are coming from our airline customers, which we are trying to address. Yes? Okay, good. Okay, good. So we are trying to address by finding solutions naturally when it comes at least to integrating and certifying elements which need to go on board. So there's a natural role as an OEM to play when it comes to solutions.
And what sort of solutions have you come up with in the past?
Well, again, I mean, the digitalization, we see that those things are ongoing. We are all working on IoT stuff. We are working on sensors putting on board. We are working on connectivity, which are bringing the data. I mean, just crossing the street to the IX, you see a lot of actors which are now completely working on those kind of things, IoT, connectivity, Satcom, they are coming. They are talking about onboard data managers. They are talking about AI solutions which are helping there. So the sector is picking that one up, which is already surrounding us all day long. I mean, we know those smart homes, we know the smart kitchen aids, we know smartphones with endless functionalities, but we don't see them yet on board. So it's not a question of technology. It is rather than taking what has been already out there and bringing it on board. And then you can even see that in commercial kitchens. One of the big fast food restaurants, they do that. They're learning by machine learning how to plan and predict these things. And it's just adapting the things which are there and bringing it into the aircraft. As simple as that.
And just probing into that a little bit more, how long have you been working on this, and do you feel that airlines are listening?
Well, I mean, as shown, we have some slides out there, some figures. We are taking that seriously since years now, and we take that frequently to our airline customers. We are reconfirming that is a topic, and we are coming up again and again. It's been with lightweight solutions on board. We are trying to densify the cabin to make sure that we are as efficient as possible. But the catering topic, let's call it like that, that's not a core OEM topic. So when it comes to bring that as a solution, that's again what I said in the beginning, we will not be successful just coming as an Airbus OEM to provide something, rather than we have to do that together. As you pointed out in your slide, that's been the airline, that's the caterer, and that's the OEM, and having also in the middle the regulation allowing that.
Okay. I just want to turn back to that headline figure of the study that we've done, which is looking at the amount of money that's being wasted on untouched food. That 3.2 billion, which is a big number. And I don't think it's very often that you end up with a sustainability and an environment benefit that actually could pay you back, potentially, for some of it. I didn't have time to go down into our analysis in a lot of detail, but when you look at the amount of uneaten food waste by passenger type, most of it's in the front of the cabin, because that's where you get offered the choice, right? And if you've not pre-ordered, there needs to be a lot of meals loaded there to give you the choice on the menu that you're after. And I would imagine KLM's no different.
Yes, I really recognize what you're saying.
Should we just switch out of these headsets to this and move it along? Would that be easier?
It's just one.
Just this one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I do recognize what you're saying. The business class passengers, we want to give them an experience, we want to offer them choice, and we see the most waste per passenger is created in our business class. Actually, we're already trying to take some steps. For example, at this moment, our overflow, which is guaranteeing that we are able to give passengers their first choice, is overflow for our crew. So these are used as crew meals to prevent them being as food waste. And on the first, you are already naming it, on the first routes, now we are implementing pre-order. And hopefully this can be a standard. If we can do pre-order on every flight, we do not have to cater additional options on board, and we are able to prevent them from being wasted.
Okay. Let's talk about pre-order a bit then, because when I've talked to airlines around the amount of pre-order that takes place if it's offered, it varies a lot. Some airlines might be as low as 10%, some potentially a bit lower, so others as high as 20%. And you mentioned a point there that most of the waste is at the front. But when we go to a restaurant and we use a menu and we decide what we want, we don't expect to be served everything, right? So pre-order as a standard seems like it would make sense. So why are we not able to do that as an industry? Why can't we make that part of the passenger experience?
I can name some barriers. For example, not all passengers are booking their tickets at our KLM website, so therefore we are missing them out because they are reaching us through booking agencies. So this is really a hard thing. In addition, it might be hard for passengers to come up with their choice already a month before flying, because that's the moment when they are booking the tickets. This is something we are experiencing, so I do recognize that on the routes where we are doing pre-order, not all passengers are pre-ordering. Right. And one option we would really like to try out bigger is giving the option to have no food, because we do see passengers entering the aircraft, already had another flight, had a transfer, just want to sleep until the moment they are landing. And at this moment, we are catering food for them. And this is part of the waste we are talking about today.
Yeah, I think we saw a bit of that on the audits as well. You know, the length of the flight and the connection is quite important. And overnights certainly seem to drive more waste per passenger than other flights. With people literally wanting to board, sleep, skipping a meal, they might pick up on the one after. Okay.
So this might be more easy to do in economy already. So undersupply in economy is already possible. We are doing that, but in world business class, pre-order would be really a next step.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to bring both you and Celine in, I think, here. KLM owns its own caterer, right, at your hub station, which I presume must bring considerable benefits around what you can do as opposed to working with a third party. Can you just explain a little bit about that dynamic?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're working really closely together with them already from the start of a design process. Which materials are we using? What are we putting on board? Because we know this will end up at their facilities. So they already have a voice during the design process in what materials do we choose, but also working together on deciding meals on board systems. So how many meals should be on board, because we see on general 5% more tickets are sold than passengers that are showing up on the plane. So if we would just put the numbers of tickets sold on the aircraft, we would have already 5% oversupply, and that's even without looking at consumption data.
Yeah.
And we're really having an advantage working together with KLM catering services so closely, which is different at outstations, for example.
And just explain a little bit about that relationship, how it's different with outstations.
Yeah, it might be better for such. I think you were already mentioning it in your presentation. We are choosing what materials we put on board, and you are recycling indeed. So every airline is making their own decisions. Are we still using SUP? Is it RPET? Is it PP? What type of material is it? And we can all communicate this to KCS, and they get lots of it, 50% of our flights. But for SATS, you are having so many airlines, so many materials, it's way harder to start recycling those.
Yep. So if I can jump in here, I think back to the keywords of collaboration and discussion. It's actually very similar to what I used to do before on the air cargo side. You have origin, destination, not always the same company handling or as a freight forwarder. And you have to exchange some information about, what's going on at origin, at destination. So I would say that collaboration, like mechanism, data sharing, discussions, finding common sense, also solutions, is very similar in the approach. I would absolutely encourage, and that's my privilege of being new in that area, to really think outside the box and really open all types of solutions, opportunity, and tests. And one of them, hearing you, would be to have that dialogue with outbound caterer, inbound caterer, and the airline. So if the three parties, discuss together, then we can understand what can be done at that lane level. If we share the data, we can also plan ahead, for the recycling part or etc. And we can influence, in that case, the sourcing at the start. So I think the key word here is discussing, collaborating on finding solutions. So we have a problem and we need to solve it. And to solve it, we need data and we need discussions.
Yeah. And what role, Daniela, do you think IATA and other bodies like the ACA or ACI have to play in trying to encourage this collaboration? Because I was sat here exactly 12 months ago on a similar panel talking about collaboration. And the year before, John was here. We were talking about the need for collaboration. How are we going to move this on in that way? And what role does IATA have to play in that and others?
Well, it has been mentioned before, right? We have discussed items of standardization. What sort of recycling processes can we all adhere to? What can be mentioned as a good practice for the industry, by the industry, and to the industry itself? And this is something that associations can do. So IATA can do it for airlines, ACA can do it for caterers, and again, I'm touching on airports here, and what sort of standardizations and frameworks can they bring forward in order to start reporting, for example. If we require information, information needs to be measured in the same way. We need to provide methodologies, right? And in this case, we need to start collaborating with other actors, such as yourself, to come up with good methodologies that are that will allow us to compare that data. So, and we move from procedures to products, right? If we all start using same products, we can bring volumes for different treatment methods. We can understand better what sort of replacements we can use that are good in different jurisdictions that have different requirements, are banning different items. So yes, I would say standardization, that's key.
Okay. And we've touched on a dynamic that's there, which is around data and the need for information. And Michael, you showed us a slide right at the very end where you're looking at using AI and image capture. And I think, Kate, you're involved with this work as well, Claire? Could you just explain a bit more about what that's going to give you, both as an airline and as an OEM?
Well, I mean, I can probably start, and you can add on that one. Again, what we said is that the visibility on what is really consumed during flight is not a given today, and even though the inventory, what has been left over at the end of the flight. So number one is really tackling that basic issue to capturing those kind of data and bringing it forward to start looking on the process, because again, we need to understand that, at least from our point of view, catering is not just to please passenger. It's been a bigger logistical problem to be solved. And data, capturing the right data, has been key to work on it. So you have to go to the process and take a look onto, if you have the data, how do you can re-implement that to the caterer in terms of planning, predicting? How do you can take those kind of information and providing means and better possibilities to even getting to the point where you have pre-orders as a mean to reduce catering to a minimum. I mean, think of the idea to have just 2 hours before your departure that you can choose your stuff. That would be ideal, but then you have to have those kind of information, bringing them all together and making sure that all those actors do have access to the same kind of data pool to work together. And that's the little thing we are trying to do firsthand, trying to capture the data, see if that fits to solving that problem, and then starting to elaborate on what's next, what can we do in terms of the process and so on.
Nothing to add.
When does this start, Claire? Is it started already? Are you using it now?
Yeah, no, first steps.
Okay.
Soon there will be a start of the pilot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Little baby steps.
And is that information that you'll be able to share with the sector, or is it'll be there to help you, or straight question?
No, we're really aiming on sharing data if it's concerning sustainability.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to hand over to the audience in a moment, and I'm sure there must be some questions out there. But I get sort of quite piqued by little things that are going on as well. So, not food, economy headsets, right? And we reckon there is nearly 400 tons of economy headsets which are heading for landfill or incineration. They're not repurposed, potentially by what we're looking at. And when I speak to individual caterers, not just SATs, they'll be saying, well, that's not enough for me to commercially be able to do much with that, because I know it's 400, but it's spread all over the world. And then I think about, well, hang on a minute, we're flying aeroplanes all over the world, and the bellies of those are quite often a little bit empty. Why can't we do collection programs on particular waste and get it to the right place? What's stopping us having those sorts of conversations just around coming together as a sector to put in place solutions like that? And I'm just interested in your views on that across the table. Who wants to go first? Okay.
Well, I think it's exactly as I mentioned. We should be an open book and explore any type of opportunity on that specific, disposable single-use headset. For me, this is lack of common sense. So surely this could be avoided. And yeah, I think it's back to drawing board, and when we have the figures, thanks to that large audit that you have done, then we can say, okay, for each of those, what can we do? How creative can we be to just try to solve the issue? And it can be just lots of different pockets of solutions that we can test and see if it works.
Yeah, if I'm dreaming big, I'm thinking of, it would be ideal, I think, to passengers to use their own device.
Yes.
Of course, that's not possible right now, but almost everyone has their own headsets. So I think that would be a solution for in the future. But the main question right now, I think, is where to start with the segregation of this stream. Would it be on board? Is crew taking this step? Would it be at a caterer? Would it be the cleaners? Yeah, that would be, I think, the first step in going to a solution.
Yeah, we think on that one, if you just had one additional person or person designated on the cleaning side that just went for the headsets, you could get them out quite easily, for example, on that one. But it then gets more complicated after that in terms of where do they put the bags, because that process would then need to change. So I do appreciate there's a huge amount of legacy supply chain around what we do and process that would have to be adapted and changed.
Or some airlines do collect,
They do.
like cabin crew do collect headsets. So whether or not this is to recycle, repurpose them, etc., or just to put them on trash, I don't know. But at least that collection process by cabin crew could be just one best practice.
Yeah.
I'm not a cabin attendant.
Okay. Michael, anything more?
Is it on? Yeah. I think we can learn also from other industries. When you look at hotels, when they get an environmental certification, they have to fulfill some criteria. In premium hotels, you get a bathrobe by standard, but if you get a green certification, they put the bathrobe out of the rooms and you get it only on demand.
Yeah.
So same for the headsets. If you do not need a headset, well, you have a headset at your place. Very simple.
Yeah.
That could be added to your IATA, certification.
Definitely. No, and in the IATA Cabin Waste Handbook that Matt mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, there are many different actions that have already been taking place, and we were discussing before that publication particularly it's from 2019, so you might think that it's quite outdated, but some of the initiatives presented are very much a hot topic today.
Yeah. Now.
Hi, quick question. Matt, this is for you as well. So we've been doing a lot of waste audits, and what we realize is the audit numbers differ a lot based on many variables. Passenger profile, time of the flight, the taste of the meals, sometimes it's the appetizer, sometimes it's something else left. It's not standard, which means we can't make a standard solution. We cannot tell our caterers that for this flight, leaving in the morning, give less ice cream, but for the same flight, leaving in the night, and you can imagine for international airlines, there's so many different flights. So my question is to all of you on the panel and perhaps some other airlines here, if you've been doing this waste audit, what is an optimum number? How do you use this data to make a change if the data can be so variable for each flight? Is it even possible? Is there a number? And waste audits are not cheap, as you would know.
They're not cheap at the moment. But I think I'd kind of just ask you another question back, which is, would you rather have some data or no data?
No, I'm sure.
You need it, right?
And that's why I'm asking how much data would be enough from people who've had experience to do this, perhaps from KLM, or how many flights should we do? Perhaps this AI would help us get data for each and every flight. Then we can find some pattern, because it's been very difficult to find a pattern to make a change. So any insight from yourself, from the panel, or from other airlines sitting here would be quite helpful.
Well, at least I would take that one, claiming that you're right. I mean, taking every flight into a bigger database to learn out of it is key. And adding to just the consumption, as we showed in, getting the consumption data is even not enough. You have to put those kind of seasonal effects, load factors, preferences, and all this stuff. You have to pull that in a bigger database. And as we heard before on the panel, AI is supporting us in finding those kind of patterns. And if you have those kind of patterns, you can start to improve the process, to better plan and predict. But I think the chicken egg question is, as we do not have the right data you're looking for now, we have to start with something. And the aim, at least from our side, is getting those kind of data out of the system to start providing a help to better plan and predict. As simple as that.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that in my opinion, we need to start small, be focused on small scale audits or data, like maybe for trade lane. You're from Cathay, right? So direct flight from Hong Kong to somewhere else, where you can really have an impact. You can control yourself, the the decisions, you can make decisions yourself on many aspects. So start small, learn from that, see where you have an easy control and easy change decisions, and then see if you can scale up. But I would rather start where you have most control on the operations.
Danny?
If I can jump in, I would definitely echo Celine. In conversations that we have had in the different projects, talk to your caterers. They would have more data, or at least some sort of insight of where you can start. But there is this need for collaboration and understanding what airlines are requiring for them as well, right? There is sometimes a pushback, and that might be a challenge, but some information is there, and then the other bit is the harmonization in the different composition audits that need to be done. We need to measure in the same way in order to be able to compare, as you said, different routes, right? Because yes, passenger behavior is extremely different depending on where, when, and how you're flying.
Yeah. I mean, now I think I just going to bring David in a moment, because you're standing next to somebody who's a bit of a pioneer around AI and the use of AI in auditing, and I'll bring him in a moment. But I think what I would just finish by saying there is we can't go through a gap of 10 years before another a decent suite of audit. We've got to find a way of keeping this going and getting better at it as a sector over time. I don't think we do have the perfect solution at the moment, but I think we've started on a path. And if we can all pull together and keep these audit programs going to give you in time the richness that you need to make the decisions that you want, then that will help solve the problem that we've got. But without that, I think we're just going to be blind throwing darts at the dartboard. And we're going to be talking about this again in a year, 2 years, 3 years. And we just don't have the time. So what we need is ongoing support for the program, which airlines and yourselves are taking place in the moment, and keep this going. Because we will get there. We'll find a solution, because that's what the video tells us we do. We'll get there. David.
Yeah, my name is David Haley. I run a company called Countify. And actually, we have pioneered using AI to help airlines understand consumption, understand what's coming off the plane, understand what's going on the plane. But her comment was actually right. There's really no magical number. It takes 5 flights, 10 flights. We have a large client in the U.S. where we look at hundreds of flights a day. And what we found is, if you're not going to, a lot of times you're not able to make flight-specific decisions because it's so hard from a provisioning perspective to get flight-specific data and make that work. But if you're able to get holistic decisions, right? If you're able to see overall a percentage of Jack Daniels is coming back, a percentage of whatever item is coming back, then you might be able to remove an entire tray, right, from that flight, which a tray might weigh 25 pounds, right? Multiply that times 1-2 million flights a year, then you have a substantial material difference. So I would say looking at overall getting the amount of data, as much data as you can get, will give you the details to make decisions. And so if you want to talk more, we're here to understand. Right?
Thank you. Let's pass the mic over here, please.
Hi, my name is Ronald. I'm a colleague of Michael. And I agree very much with the granularity to get the data more granular and understanding better on the level of the flight, on the date of the flight, etc. But I also agree with you, starting with the data, the first step is already a very good first step, and I want to congratulate you on the data that you get together, because I think it was a hell of a job, and also the participation of the people who work with it. I have one question regarding the 1.2 kilograms, and you said it was 65% of that was 65% of that was the food and drinks.
Let's try.
65% of that was food and drinks. But if you break this down into food and drinks, how much was actually the drinks? Because 1.2 kilograms, how much grams was actually drinks and how much was actually food? Do you have this figure as well?
I do have them. I'm not going to be able to tip them off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I can give that to you.
Okay.
I think what we're really trying to say is that whether it is part drunk drink or full wasted drink, that's in that 60-odd% at the top. Okay. The rest of it is part touch food. Somebody's taken a mouthful, bit of salad, stopped.
Yeah. Okay.
or it's completely sealed
Okay.
and never seen a mouth.
Okay, but you have this
Yeah, we
differentiation.
do.
Okay,
We do.
because that's a very interesting figure, because
Yeah.
it's a different problem, because the cans you can reuse, as was explained,
Correct.
but it is the weight that you don't want to carry,
Yeah.
and the other one you don't want to bring the food in.
But there's nuances as well around caterers will have strip down process, right? So if the crew happen to put a full can in the wrong place, it may well end up just going out as waste.
Yeah, okay.
So there's a lot of discipline on board as well that's required.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Sorry if I can just, I was not prepared, but about 27% for beverages, either closed or open, and then for food, almost 40%.
Yeah, thank you.
But yeah.
All right, thanks.
Collaboration.
Yeah, very good. Happy to do.
Anybody else before we close?
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, panel. I just want to echo the comment there about a big thanks to ASF and the volunteers who've worked on this. The data is compelling, but Matt, as you said, once every 10 years
Not
doesn't
enough.
give us what we need. We need frequent and regular audits, and we're going to need the support of IATA to make this stick and to help us in the conversations with the other catering organizations to tackle this as an industry. And so it's great to hear you talking about collaboration. Please don't give up. Please keep trying. And I think the more we do, the more we can do that. But we are going to need the support of IATA and the other groups along this journey as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else, or we'll close? I'd really like to thank my panel. There were some tricky questions there, but we needed to try and surface as much as we possibly could. The ASF data is available. I'm quite happy if there's questions on that. Do get in touch with us. Do let us talk to you and understand if there's airlines out there, understand your problems and what you're trying to achieve. We won't stop. We have to get more granular data and more frequently, and we'll do everything we possibly can to support this brilliant industry and ensure that we try and get to a much better future around the amount of waste that we're generating. But I can't thank SATS enough, KLM, Cathay and other airlines, Singapore Airlines, that helped us with this, because without that and the endorsement of IATA, importantly, we could not have done this work in the first place. So my thanks very much to the panel.